Hello and welcome. First, let me begin by saying thank you to all of you joining this call. We understand your time is very valuable and we truly appreciate it. I'd like to start with a small disclaimer. The information I'm about to present should by no means be considered legal advice. This information comes from decades of collective industry experience coupled with extensive research performed by our team. If you are in need of legal advice, we highly recommend that you seek professional legal counsel. Let's dive right in. Today we'll be talking about how to navigate fleet liability and nuclear verdicts. The sad reality today is that 8-figure nuclear verdicts against companies are skyrocketing. While many factors contribute to this growth, knowing how to protect your business, fleet, and drivers is key to avoiding and mitigating potential litigation. Today we're going to learn a little bit about what's fueling these trends and how to best position your organization to protect yourself. My name is Mauricio Berber. I'm the president of RMJ Technologies and Predictive Coach. My business partner and I started this business back in 2006. At the beginning, our primary focus was to help companies better their bottom line. Through the use of telematics, we could significantly improve their efficiency and significantly reduce their costs. But then something happened. Over time, we began to realize that the challenges that we were learning about in the fleet industry were a lot deeper than that. Some were financial, but the most important one, the one that really stood out to us, was the amount of life being lost as a result of risky driver behavior. So our mission became clear. We not only have to provide our customers with technology that can help their bottom line, but we also needed to provide them with something that can help them reduce that risk and reduce the amount of life being lost. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to just talk about the definition of nuclear verdict. We're going to talk about the rise of these verdicts, share some stats, talk about what's fueling the verdicts, how to best protect your fleet and organization. We'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of telematics. Yes, there are weaknesses and there are issues that we need to talk about because for the most part, it's been painted as a beautiful, most amazing thing in the world, which it is, but there are other factors that are putting the organization at risk. And then through the extensive research that we did, we're going to share with you some steps that can help you better protect your organization against a nuclear verdict or a willful negligence claim. Simply put, what is a nuclear verdict? A nuclear verdict is defined as a jury award in which the penalty exceeds $10 million. Simple, right? Well, that's happening a ton. And now we can talk about the rise of nuclear verdicts. It turns out that rising insurance premiums and nuclear verdicts are often cited in carrier bankruptcies as the primary cause for shutting down. Think about that for a second. A lot of transportation companies are shutting down as a result of a nuclear verdict or their insurance premium skyrocketing. And that's very common nowadays. Well, at the end of 2019, estimates are that trucking bankruptcies nearly quadrupled in comparison to 2018. Insurance carriers are so tired of paying out these nasty verdicts that they're just exiting the industry altogether. Understanding that the margins for companies are already very limited, and you couple that with the insurance premiums eating a majority of those margins, it makes a company think twice about staying in business. And we've heard and we've seen that happen time over time, where people are just saying, you know what, screw this, I'm out, I cannot take it, I'm not even making any money anymore. The stress is just not worth it. And then there's the intangible disaster. One challenge of analyzing and predicting nuclear verdicts is their intangible nature. They're often so disconnected from reality in terms of award amounts compared to actual economic damages. People are just throwing random numbers, they're sticking. And we'll talk a little bit about how or why that's happening. But first, let's take a look at some stats. This was released in June of 2020 by ATRI, that is the American Transportation Research Institute, where they looked at 600 cases between 2006 and 2019. Now, between 2006 and 2011, there were only 26 cases over $1 million awarded. But between 2015 and 2019, there were 300 cases of over $1 million. That's an average growth of nearly 51.7% between 2010 and 2018. Taking into account that standard inflation only grew by 1.7% and healthcare costs only grew by 2.9%, there's a significant delta between those two. And the graph shows it. So, what's fueling these nuclear verdicts? Well, let's dissect that a little bit. The emergent tactics from the plaintiff's bar aimed at getting jurors to punish defendants is highly successful. What they're doing is they're tapping into the reptile brain, which is our fight or flight mechanism, which makes jurors feel threatened, and therefore they lash out and or punish the defendant. So they've gone from a strategy of sympathy to now anger. And they're angering these juries enough to be able to say this plaintiff deserves many millions of dollars. And it's sticking. So these emerging tactics have left the defense bar scrambling to catch up. They're truly trying, they're behind. They're trying to play a game that's so fine-tuned nowadays that it's very difficult and very seldom that there are firms that are very successful in combating nuclear verdicts. So these tactics, because they're so successful, they're spreading like wildfire nationwide. There are highways littered with billboards talking about, if you've been in an accident, call me. If you've been in an injury, you've been injured by a trucking company, call me. And I mean, just in Texas alone, we see the Texas Hammer just throwing it around, just talking about how he can get you so many different crazy settlements, a lot of money. And so that's becoming a bit of an issue because it's just becoming a norm. The other issue is that there's a growing distrust in corporate America. Remember, jurors are human, and they relate more so with the person who's been hit by the trucking company than they do with the actual the company or the corporation that they're looking to make a judgment on. So that is a key component, right? If there is a human factor and there's already a distrust in corporate America and in the corporations, jurors are going to side on the side of the plaintiff. And of course, there is the anchoring damages effort. Suggesting a dollar amount, even if fictitious, jurors tend to gravitate towards that number. So in other words, if the plaintiff's bar does a good enough job of angering the jury and they throw a crazy number up there, the jury is naturally going to gravitate towards it because they made a strong case that they need to teach that corporation a lesson. And often they do. How do we protect your fleet? Are telematics alone enough? We've learned over the last 15 years of being in business that in order to have a successful telematics system in place, you need to make sure you address key elements. First one is you have to be able to manage the data. Nowadays, everybody across the board who offers telematics has a beautiful reporting suite, a beautiful scorecard. And that's great. I think that's amazing. It's great optics. But you need to be able to close the gap between data, discipline, and outcome. In other words, you have to be able to take that data and translate it into discipline and be able to get good outcomes, change the behavior. But then there's the now what? There's all this data that comes in. Managers are already overwhelmed by the amount of work they have on their plate. Now you asking them to look at the data, process it, and then bring drivers in for discipline. Unless you clone that manager, which is nearly impossible, but not outruled, it's not going to happen. And oftentimes it doesn't. So if the now what is not addressed, and what we're saying, I have all this data, but what do I do with it? If that's not addressed, you automatically get exposed to willful negligence. It's only a matter of time before a driver gets into an accident as a result of risky driver behavior. The court orders a subpoena, and then they find out that your managers have not been able to, or just have not looked at the data to correct it. Often that's looked at as willful negligence. But as a result of having the willful negligence, automatically comes our next point, which is the nuclear verdict. If the jury finds out that you had this information available, but decided not to act on it, that's when they say, you know what, you're evil, you don't care. You simply just care about the dollar and you don't care about saving lives. That's when it gets really ugly. So we have to look at GPS tracking as a double-edged sword. On one end, we have great optics, again, great efficiency, increased operations, better management, better vehicle use, optimum fuel usage, all of that fun stuff. But on the other side, there are three key elements that are ticking time bombs. The volumes of data that are coming in that are not being managed, the unintentional or intentional neglect of the data from the managers, exposing to the willful negligence, right? So now we have three very, very important ticking time bombs that need to be looked at and carefully addressed. So how do we address those? Simple. You have to align yourself with the very reliable end-to-end safety suite. In our experience, we found that these have worked very well. You have to have a robust telematics system, one that gives you all the reports, all the things that I mentioned. In today's day and age, it's the word of the driver and the corporation against the plaintiff and the jury who needs to be able to really believe the story. Many cases, if there's not a camera in a vehicle, it's going to be the word of the driver against the witnesses who often are startled or vaguely remember and they have a blurry recollection of what occurred. And it's far from reality. Video does not lie. So if you have video evidence that shows that your driver wasn't at fault or your company wasn't at fault, it exonerates you quickly. It saves you a lot of time. It saves you a lot of money. It saves you a lot of headache. So video is very important to have. But even having telematics and having the video will be pointless unless you actually correct the behaviors, because the telematics is going to tell you how your drivers are doing. Not all are going to be doing great. Some are going to need some attention. The video will also tell you all the near misses that you had. You hand those keys to those drivers on a regular basis, and you hope that they don't do something stupid. But because emotional driving is a thing, and they're blasting their music full throttle, or if they're late, they're going to drive a lot more erratically than they usually would. Especially if you're not sitting in the passenger seat, which we know is not realistic for you to clone yourself and be in the passenger seat of every vehicle. So your hope is that they do what's best for the company and what's best for them. Sometimes the rationale doesn't really kick in, and they act on emotion. So they're speeding, they're doing erratic behaviors, can sometimes lead to an accident. That leads us over to, how do we address that? How do we take that heavy lifting off of the managers who are getting all this data, video clips, reports, scorecards, and we translate it into an effective way of correcting that behavior? Well, it's simple. We actually really dug deep into understanding how that all works and what it was going to take to fix that. And so we created Predictive Coach, which is behavior-based automated driver training. Now that's important. The behavior-based and automated driver training is important because what happens is we're putting control on the risk manager to be able to say what their risk tolerance is. How many speeding infractions are they going to allow? How many hard braking infractions will they allow for one single day? How many seatbelt violations will they allow? Now remember, seatbelt is a huge deal. And with the geotab device, you can actually know when your drivers are wearing the seatbelt or not. That could save a life. But we take those behaviors based on the risk tolerance of the fleet manager. Once those behaviors are reached and broken, then a digestible 3 to 5 minute course is assigned to that driver. Two things happen. One, the driver is now aware that he's being held accountable for his behavior, and the management is actually paying attention. And two, we're creating a paper trail, evidence that if ever they were subpoenaing your GPS tracking records, they're going to show that you were proactively coaching your drivers to make them better. In a case study done by Virginia Tech, they were able to show that through the use of behavior-based automated driver training, we were able to reduce risky driving behaviors by as much as 74%. Our hope when we created Predictive Coach was to hit at least 25%. When they came back with a 74% reduction, we were floored. And quite excited, to be frank, because this is the missing piece to that gap that we were talking about. The now what? We get the data, what do we do next? We assign driver training. And even as good as the driver training is, it's really not going to work unless you have a policy that's proactive in safety. If there is no policy that's stern about making sure that drivers adhere to the policies, you might as well not waste your money on what I would call paperweights. The data's there, you're not managing it. The video's there, you're not looking at it. The trainings are assigned, but you're not really holding them accountable. You might as well not waste your money. It's so important that the fourth and most important part of this equation is the proactive safety policy. So I emphasize that because all of those things coupled together, it's the dream team, right? It's the dream team to be able to protect your organization. But if you don't have that final one, which is a stern policy, then you're wasting your time and money. So simply stated, it's important to have a comprehensive safety program and orientation. It's super important to have end-to-end safety solution suite. And when I say end-to-end safety suite, and we talk about those products that we talked about earlier in the previous slide, it's important that you don't get swayed to go buy something cheap, something cheap from China because it's very inexpensive, or on Amazon. Although those products could be good, those are probably better used for a consumer, not for a commercial. These things have to withstand temperatures, beat up, vibrations, all these different things. So you have to have things that are reliable and proven, tested in that environment. Many times we hear customers saying, or people saying that, hey, you know what, I bought this because I wanted to go the cheap route, and then when I really needed it, the video didn't work. So what is the point of buying that, right? And now I still have to pay the settlement. So just be careful not to just go buy something off the shelf or order online just because it's cheap. Make sure that you have something that's been tested, proven to actually work and be reliable. And then number 3, do everything in your power to avoid points of negligence, specifically willful negligence. Take the data, process the data, assign to corrective measures based on that data. and then be proactive in addressing the safety issues. Again, if a training course, for example, gets assigned, make sure it gets done on time. Don't let the drivers pile it up, because again, there's no point in you spending the money on this automated training if your drivers are just going to compile it and basically you're telling them, I don't care if you take it or not. That sends a really nasty message when it comes to the court. And as I mentioned, we have extensive experience in the transportation industry, many decades of collective experience, but we really wanted to dig deep into those attorneys, those law firms that are truly understanding and combating and being successful at combating nuclear verdicts. So Bob Tyson and Mendez, headquartered in San Diego, they have many offices throughout the nation. They published a book called Nuclear Verdicts, Defending Justice for All. And in this book, Bob talks about nuclear verdicts and how to best position your organization against large settlements. The first thing he talks about in this book, and I'm giving you the cliff notes, and again, this isn't a commercial for Bob, but it is a great book, and it's not an advertisement for Tyson and Mendez. I just think that they are well versed in this nuclear verdict situation that we're talking about. So in the book, it talks about how organizations should not, and I repeat, should not advertise an emphasis on safety. Our focus is safety. Don't do that. You're putting a target on your back. People are going to want to test that. They're going to want to, there are people who literally are out there trying to commit fraud. And if your focus is on safety, they're going to want to test it. So just be cautious of that. It's more like do more, say less, right? Just don't have to advertise about it. Just make sure your drivers are being safe. Accept responsibility. Now this is one that's kind of, feels like counterintuitive, but in reality, understanding how the whole nuclear verdict process works, accepting responsibility, it's an offensive move to be able to combat that demonizing that the plaintiff's bar is going to do, right? So you want to make sure your firm is accepting responsibility. Hey, you know what? It happened. We accept responsibility. It then takes the demonization away and allows for the jury to see that there's a human component behind it. And actually, the third one is give a number. You are going to be proactively on the offensive, right? They're going to come back with 50 million, 80 million, 100 million. You need to come up with a reasonable number. And why would you give a number if you're not guilty? It's a great question. But the fact of the matter is, when you're already in the jury, when you're on a floor, they're going to find a way to make you guilty. Unless you have great evidence that completely exonerates you, that jury, if it's left up to the jury, there's a very high probability that you're going to lose. Instead of them coming to you with an $80 million, $100 million judgment, you're going to come back with a realistic number of, hey, maybe $500,000 will take care of that. We'll just take care of it now. And more often than not, that amount gets absorbed versus the crazy amount that's being thrown by the plaintiff's bar. And of course, you have to defeat the pain and suffering. Promoting common sense when pain and suffering tactics are used helps ground the jury and focus on a more reasonable award. So again, you are proactively saying, okay, we're at fault. Here, we're willing to pay. And of course, you have to, number 5, defeat the reptile brain. You have to take that away from the juries so that they don't immediately think of lashing out and punishing the defendant. They have to be able to, you have to be able to diffuse that and use it to your advantage. And of course, the last one is use a theme. One of the things Bob talks about in his book is that there are going to be many factors that could make your case fall apart. A witness not showing up, a witness backing out, a witness changing their story, testimony, many different variables. But if you have a common theme across the board, it guarantees the organization will still be positioned to win, even if any of those factors occur. So it's really important to really get with professionals who have done this before, know the game, and understand how to combat it. So in summary, nuclear verdicts are not going away. Let's face it, they're actually going the other direction. They're starting to continue to grow. So they just keep growing. And it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when, unfortunately. Something's going to happen. Subpoenas are going to occur. And it's best for you to be prepared rather than have to be reactive and then find yourself in a really nasty settlement. Comprehensive safety. Having a comprehensive safety suite, safety procedures, and ongoing safety programs enforce your orientation towards safety and concern, and that sticks as a culture. You're able to protect your organization automatically by having a proactive safety program. Number 4, go pro. Don't just hire average Joe from down the street that just got a law firm because they were affordable. Make sure that if you're going to spend the money and if you're going to really want to win, go to those folks that have been proven to really know and understand how these nuclear verdicts are working and how to combat those as best as possible. So truly emphasize, go with a professional counsel that truly understands the process. And then lastly, quite simple, make safety a priority every day and at every opportunity. Fleets cannot risk their organization and lives on hope and optimism alone. I emphasize that it's important to have a live safety program ongoing with your drivers. My name again is Mauricio Berber, President of Predictive Coach and R&J Technologies. I will welcome any questions at this point. Thank you again for being part of this presentation and for listening in. Hope you have a great day.